Well, people were finding these unexploded incendiary bombs, and they were bringing them in. And the officer went white when he saw them and demanded that a trench was dug immediately and these were buried. It was a Sunday morning, and we were grouped round the little radio. Well, it was called wireless in those days. We sat round to hear Neville Chamberlain's speech, and I was sitting with my father on my left and my mother on my right. And when he said, as a result of, that no such undertaking had been received, this country was now at war with Germany. And I'll never forget the look that passed between my parents, because it wasn't all that long, it was only 20 years that they'd been involved in the First World War. It was a very knowing look of two people who'd gone through all this, gone through a war, and they would know what the consequences of being at war really were. And they weren't able to communicate that to me in the same sense somehow. It's just between them, two participants. All sorts of memories must have come flooding back to them, but they never said anything. It had cobble streets, which will never be removed, no street lighting, so the blackout didn't really bother us all that much. Lovely old cottages, always painted white at Easter. There were no tractors. Because of the steep-sided valleys, they had to use horses and sledges. They couldn't use wheel vehicles at all. It was so open and free, just sheep, very few cattle. The air was so clean. It was a charming little place, and it just captured my heart altogether. It was magical. Dad used to do a lot of lecturing, and I used to go along as his patient, and he used to demonstrate on me all the bandaging, so I was brought up to be able to do it all. And it was just a love of my life, was that. So he knew that I could put the bandages up just as well as he could by the time he'd done. We worked well together. I suppose I was Dad's girl, possibly because he hadn't a son, and I was willing to do these sort of things. I enjoyed the adventure behind all the things that we used to do together. And, if he gave me something to do, he would expect me to make a good job of it, or at least have a good go at it. They trained in a field just across from our house at the end of the village. And 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, Mum and I always made sure that we were on our landing behind a thick curtain, net curtain, so that we could actually see what the Home Guard were doing. They'd all got 2 left feet and going in opposite directions. And they really did turn up with pitchforks and farm implements and whatnot. If you've ever seen Dad's Army, you've seen Dent's Home Guard in its early stages. It was Dad's Army to a T. We even had a Captain Mannering. He was an officer from Sedbergh Public School. He obviously thought he was the bee's knees and knew everything about the army. I don't think he'd ever seen any action in the First World War. He more likely flew a desk of some sort, but he certainly didn't know anything about fighting. He used to strut along full of his own importance. That was a hilarious bit, the way he used to lead his men up the village street. You see him now. Oh dear. My job was, when we got an air raid warning at our police house, which was right on the edge of the village. I had to go and call the wardens out, usually on my bicycle, in pitch black over the cobbles. It was a bit of a dicey arrangement, was that. By the time I got everybody rounded up, the thing was over anyway. We did have one air raid when the German Air Force paid a visit to the next village and dropped 400 incendiary bombs, most of which didn't explode. But those that did didn't do any damage. Luckily, nobody was hurt and no serious fires were started. But that led to a rather odd thing. They said in those days if you found any unusual objects to hand them in at the nearest police station. Well, people were finding these unexploded incendiary bombs and they were bringing them in to our house. We amassed some 200 by the time we'd done, and they were in the garage. Mother wouldn't touch them. Dad was out on his beat, and most of the time I was handling them and stacking them up in the garage. Well, we got the bomb disposal people out to have a look at them, and the officer went white when he saw them and demanded that a trench was dug immediately and these were buried and soaked in water until such times as they could dispose of them properly. So my father's potato patch had to be dug up to put these bombs in for the time being. And we found out that the normal incendiary bomb had 3 little holes around the bottom, and these had 5, which was something new. And the Germans had started putting high explosive into these that had 5 holes in them at the bottom. And so they were an anti-personnel device and would have exploded, and done quite a bit of damage to anybody picking them up if one had gone off. Luckily they didn't, especially for me, because I'd handled the best part of 200 of them. I was hoping to go into the services, but I was an only girl, an only child in the middle of a war, and knowing that look between my mum and dad when war started, I couldn't see that they would grant me permission to go. I desperately wanted to join up, so I got 1 or 2 leaflets and things and started dotting them around the house, particularly in the bathroom, and I knew they'd been read and moved. But nothing was ever said, they were never discussed. Time was ticking, and I thought, I've got to find out whether I'm going to be able to go or not. So eventually, I got Mum and Dad together. I thought, this has gone on long enough, dropping leaflets around the house and not getting any reply. So I got them together and I said, you know that I would very much like to join the services. So I said, I think it's time we talked about it now, openly. So I said, what do you think, Dad? So he said, I think you better ask your mum. So I thought, uh-oh. So I said, oh, what do you think, Mum? Well, she said, I think it's up to your Dad. So I thought, well, that leaves me in exactly the same position that I started the discussion. And I didn't want to upset them or offend them in any way. But I thought, well, I only had 1 trump card that I could think of. So I said, well, I said, you were a corporal in the First World War, weren't you, Dad? So he said, yes. I said, you were Sergeant Major, weren't you, Mum? She said, yes. And then Dad looked across at Mum. He says, she's got you there, Rosa. I was in. They decided then, because I just suddenly thought of it, that they'd both served. They couldn't very well refuse me on those grounds. And I always remember he gave me a packet of 20 Players cigarettes because I didn't know that he knew that I smoked, but apparently he did. He wished me well I knew he would. He'd be a bit gutted, I suppose, deep down. He said, well, he said, you're in now, love. He said, and if you don't like it, he says, there's nothing Mum and I can do. He said, we can't get you back out again. He says, you're in it now for the duration. So he says, you'll have to make the best of it if you don't like it. I says, Dad, I'm going to love it.